Jake Holloway wasn't supposed to disappear. At 11:17 p.m., he sent his mother a simple text. "Be hearing home now. Love ya." It was routine, something he did every time he left his best friend Matt's house after a late-night hangout. The drive home was just 25 minutes, a familiar stretch of highway cutting through the dense Pennsylvania woods. But somewhere along that road, Jake vanished. At 6:30 a.m., a highway patrol officer noticed a car pulled over on the shoulder of Silver Pine Highway, a desolate stretch of road notorious for its sharp turns and thick fog. The silver Honda Civic's headlights were still on, the engine long dead. The driver's door was open. The officer approached, expecting to find a stranded motorist. Instead, he found something much worse. Jake's phone was on the passenger seat, screen cracked, displaying an unsent text message. "Something's not right. I think someone's following me." That message sent chills down his mother's spine when she read it hours later. Jake had been scared, and he had tried to reach out, but he never got the chance to press send. The police launched a search immediately, scouring the dense forest surrounding the highway. Bloodhounds picked up his scent, but it vanished abruptly near a dirt path leading deeper into the woods. It was as if Jake had been plucked from existence. There were no signs of a struggle, no footprints, no blood, just an abandoned car and a cryptic, unsent message. His family, desperate for answers, pleaded for help. Flyers were posted all over town, social media exploded with theories, and volunteers combed the woods. But the more they searched, the stranger things got. Detectives discovered that Jake's last phone signal ping had been at 11:42 p.m., 15 minutes after he left Matt's house, right near Silver Pine Forest. That was the last trace of him. What happened in those missing minutes? And why did Jake believe someone was following him? The deeper investigators dug, the more disturbing the case became, because Jake wasn't just a random victim. He had been investigating something. And someone had been watching. The disappearance of Jake Holloway sent shockwaves through the small town of Ridgewood, Pennsylvania. It wasn't the kind of place where people vanished. Crime was low and everyone knew each other. But now, fear spread like wildfire. Detective Olivia Carter, a seasoned investigator with the Pennsylvania State Police, was assigned to the case. From the start, something felt off. Jake wasn't the type to run away. He had no history of mental health issues, no drug use, no enemies. He was a journalism student, smart, ambitious, and well-liked. Yet, he had disappeared without a trace. The first stop in the investigation was Matt Pearson, Jake's best friend and the last known person to see him. Matt recounted their night together. "He left my place around 11:15 p.m. He was fine, maybe a little tired, but nothing seemed wrong. We had been talking about his latest project, something he was researching, but he didn't give me many details." That's when Matt hesitated. His face paled slightly before he added, "But he did say something weird last week. He told me that if anything ever happened to him, I should check his laptop." That was the first real clue. Jake's parents allowed police access to his dorm room at Ridgewood University, where they found his laptop sitting on his desk. It was locked, but the department's tech team cracked it within an hour. Inside, they found a folder labeled Silver Pine. Detective Carter clicked it open, revealing dozens of documents, photos, and old newspaper clippings, all of them centered on one case: the 2013 disappearance of Laura Jennings, a 19-year-old college student who had vanished near Silver Pine Highway, the exact place where Jake's car was found. Laura's case had gone cold a decade ago. No body, no leads, no answers. Just another young person who had wandered off and was never seen again. But Jake had been looking into it. One file in particular stood out, a handwritten note from Jake himself. "Last person to see Laura, David Connolly, works at the gas station on Route 6. Had Jake gone to talk to David Connolly? If so, was it possible that Laura Jennings' disappearance and Jake's were connected? Detective Carter's gut told her this was no coincidence. Someone in Ridgewood knew what had happened to Laura, and now they might have done the same thing to Jake. Detective Olivia Carter sat in her office, staring at the grainy black-and-white photo of Laura Jennings. She had vanished exactly 10 years ago, and now Jake Holloway was missing under eerily similar circumstances. Coincidence? Not likely. Laura was 19 when she disappeared, a college sophomore, just like Jake. Her car had been found on the side of Silver Pine Highway, driver's door open, phone still inside. Sound familiar? At the time, police had searched the woods for weeks, but Laura had seemingly vanished into thin air. There were whispers in town, rumors of a local predator, but with no evidence, no leads, and no body, the case faded into memory. Jake had been digging into Laura's disappearance, but why? And had it led him straight into the same danger? The answer might lie with David Connolly, the last person to see Laura alive. Carter arrived at Route 6 Gas and Convenience, where David Connolly still worked. He was in his early 40s now, graying hair, tired eyes, and a face that looked like it had seen too much. She walked up to the counter. "We need to talk." David sighed, rubbing his temples. "This about that Holloway kid?" Carter nodded. David leaned in. "Listen, I already told the cops back in 2013 I didn't do anything to that girl. But Jake thought you knew something. Did he come here?" David hesitated. That was all Carter needed to know. He licked his lips, shifting nervously. "Yeah, he came in last week, asking questions, wanted to know about Laura. Said he thought the cops missed something." "What did you tell him?" David swallowed hard. "That? I saw her that night. She came in around midnight, real freaked out. She kept looking over her shoulder like someone was watching her. Then she ran out. That was the last time I saw her." Carter narrowed her eyes. "And you didn't think that was important?" David exhaled shakily. "I didn't want to get involved, but I'll tell you this. That kid, Holloway, he said he'd figured something out. He said he knew what happened to her." Carter's blood ran cold. If Jake had found out the truth about Laura, had someone silenced him before he could reveal it? Detective Olivia Carter left the gas station with a growing sense of dread. Jake had uncovered something about Laura's disappearance, something dangerous enough to get him taken. But who would have wanted to silence him? Back at the station, she re-examined the Silver Pine case files. That's when something caught her eye. The security footage from the gas station on the night Laura disappeared. The grainy footage showed Laura running into the store at 12:03 a.m. She seemed anxious, looking behind her as if someone had followed her there, just as David Connolly had described. Then, just before she ran out, a dark SUV pulled into the lot. The driver never got out. Laura saw the vehicle, froze, then sprinted out of the store and vanished into the night. That SUV was never identified. Carter's gut told her this was the key. Whoever was in that vehicle was the last person to see Laura alive. Had Jake found them? Carter requested security footage from the week before Jake's disappearance. When the files arrived, her stomach clenched. There it was again. A dark SUV parked at the gas station the night Jake was there. And watching him, her pulse pounded. Had the same person who took Laura been following Jake? Then another disturbing discovery surfaced. Traffic cameras near Silver Pine Highway picked up a vehicle following Jake's car the night he disappeared. It was blurry, but it was clear enough to see a dark SUV. Carter's mind raced. This wasn't random. Jake had been targeted. And if the same person who took Laura had taken Jake, then that meant they had been hunting for years. Detective Olivia Carter could feel it in her gut. Jake Holloway hadn't just disappeared. He had been taken. And now she had a suspect. The dark SUV that appeared in both Laura Jennings and Jake Holloway's cases was the missing piece of the puzzle. Someone had been stalking victims for years, waiting for the right moment to strike. But who was behind the wheel? Carter dug through the original 2013 case files. There had to be something the original investigators missed. As she flipped through old witness statements, one name jumped out at her. Sheriff Alan Decker. He had been one of the first officers on the scene when Laura went missing. He had filed the initial reports. He had been overseeing the search efforts. And yet, his name barely appeared in the case notes. Why? Then Carter found something chilling. A vehicle registration from 2013. A black Chevy Tahoe, owned by Alan Decker. Her hands trembled as she pulled up Ridgewood's current vehicle database. Decker had sold the SUV 5 years ago, but Jake had seen it last week. Someone still had the car. Carter's next stop was Decker's property, a secluded house on the outskirts of Ridgewood. It was an old farmhouse, surrounded by dense forest, far from the main road, the kind of place no one would hear you scream. She knocked on the door. No answer. Something didn't feel right. Was she walking into a trap? Then she saw it, a detached garage, padlocked shut. Her instincts screamed at her. If Jake was still alive, he was here. Gun drawn, she moved closer, stepping carefully through the overgrown grass. The lock looked new, the metal gleaming under her flashlight beam. Her heart pounded as she gripped the bolt cutters. Snap! The lock fell away. Carter yanked open the door and froze. Inside, the dim light flickered over a dirt-stained mattress. Chains, a bloody shirt. Jake's bloody shirt. And on the far wall, a row of Polaroids, each one showing a different face. Laura, Jake, and at least 5 other missing people. This wasn't just a killer. This was a hunter, and Carter had just stepped into his lair. Detective Olivia Carter's breath hitched as she took in the horrific scene. The chains, the bloody shirt, the Polaroids of missing people. This was a place of nightmares. Jake had been here. Maybe still was. The creak of wood behind her sent a jolt through her spine. She wasn't alone. Her fingers tightened around her gun as she turned. A figure emerged from the shadows. Sheriff Alan Decker. His uniform was gone, replaced with a dark jacket and heavy boots, the kind you'd wear to hunt in the woods. His expression was eerily calm, his blue eyes cold and unreadable. "You shouldn't be here, Detective," he said, voice smooth as ice. Carter raised her gun. "Where's Jake?" Decker tilted his head, as if amused. "You already know, don't you?" She didn't want to believe it. The town's sheriff, the man who had led the search for Laura Jennings, had been the predator all along. "How long?" Carter demanded, stepping forward. "How long have you been doing this?" Decker sighed, as if she was being unreasonable. 15 years. The weight of his confession nearly made her knees buckle. 15 years. How many victims, how many families had gone on, never knowing what happened to their loved ones? "Jake wasn't supposed to dig into this," Decker continued. "He got too close, just like you." Then he moved. Carter barely had time to react. A gunshot shattered the silence. For a second she thought she had been hit, but then Decker staggered back, blood blooming across his shoulder. Carter didn't hesitate. She fired again. Decker dropped to the floor. Heavy footsteps pounded from the back of the garage. Carter whirled, gun ready, and there he was. Jake. Weak, battered, but alive. His wrists were raw from the cuffs, his face bruised, but he was breathing. Relief crashed through Carter like a tidal wave. "It's over," she whispered. Jake swallowed hard, voice shaking. "Not yet," he said. She frowned. "What do you mean?" Jake's haunted eyes lifted to the wall of Polaroids. "There were more of them," he whispered. Decker wasn't working alone. A chill ran down Carter's spine. Somewhere in the darkness, someone else was still out there, watching, waiting. The hunt wasn't over.